Welcome, everyone, to the Coin Bureau podcast. My name is Guy, and his name
is Mad Mike Mooch.
Yeah, it sure is. How you doing?
Mooch.
Just Mooch.
I'm good, man.
Yeah?
I'm good.
Yeah? You sound a little bit gravelly.
Yeah, I was a little bit under the weather at the start of the week, but I'm feeling fine now.
Good. We are going to talk about Ethereum today again.
Part 4.
Part 4, yeah. And this is the final part on Ethereum. Because
final part that we're talking about it now, I imagine, because I'm sure this story is not over.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This story's just getting started. But yeah, so today we're going to kind of bring Ethereum up. Last time we finished up by looking at how Ethereum was at the center of the ICO boom. That was in kind of that was all through 2017 and into early 2018. And that was involved hundreds of projects launching on the Ethereum network and raising money through these token sales, these initial coin offerings or ICOs, which was this whole new way of raising capital. And boy, did they raise some capital. I mean, we're talking billions here, if you remember. And yeah, it all got a little crazy. And we ended last time by noting that the demand for these ICOs, the demand to participate, the demand to buy tokens was so great that at times the Ethereum network just couldn't cope with it all, with all the people trying to use it, and just kind of crashed or slowed to a crawl. And yeah, so on the timeline, we're roughly at the end of 2017. Okay, so speaking of Ethereum slowing down, before we kind of carry on with the timeline and kind of what happened after that, I want to go back to another event that took place towards the end of November, towards the end of 2017 in November, and that was the launch of the CryptoKitties. The CryptoKitties. I think we may have mentioned these in a previous episode, but for anyone unfamiliar...
I'm unfamiliar.
Okay, so the CryptoKitties were, well, they still are, they're still a thing. These are digital images of cartoon cats.
Oh, so an NFT.
An NFT,
Fine.
Yeah. So late 2017, it also saw Vitalik persuaded to eventually fire Ming Chan, who is the executive director of the Ethereum Foundation. And if you remember, she'd come on board. And, yeah, she'd upset a lot of people. She had a very sort of weird style of management. Her behavior was a little bit erratic. But it wasn't actually until January 2018 that she was sort of finally ushered out the door, and she was replaced by someone called Aya Miyaguchi, who had previously worked at Kraken, which is, well, was then and is now a big cryptocurrency exchange based in the US. So the Ethereum Foundation had this new executive director who I think worked a lot better with Vitalik and was just, you know, a better fit for the role. So this kind of closes a chapter, Ming Chan's departure. And what it meant was that Vitalik was by now the only one of the original Ethereum founders still on board. Ming Chan wasn't an actual founder, but she'd been there for quite a while. All the other founders had either been fired or kind of pushed out the door or just left to kind of go off and do their own thing. So Vitalik was the only one left.
Highlander,
yeah, there can be only one. And so now let's move into 2018. So as we saw, late 2017 and even early 2018, it was just crazy. As I said, prices were going crazy. Ethereum was touching its all-time high, Bitcoin too, all these ICOs. Everyone was talking about crypto. And obviously, this couldn't last. What goes up must come down. And the warning signs had actually been appearing in 2017. In September, if I remember, China ordered all crypto exchanges to shut down. And this is China is a kind of recurring theme in these years of crypto. It's like China would decide that it was going to crack down on crypto a little bit harder, and the market would tank as a result. So September 2017, China ordered all crypto exchanges to shut down, which obviously made it very difficult for Chinese people to get their hands on crypto. And this was a warning sign. And then on December the 11th, I think it was in the US, the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, issued a cease and desist order against an ICO project, and they accompanied it with a press release saying that the project had been selling unregistered securities. Now, this was bad because selling securities without a license
is a big no-no in America.
Yeah, you can do some pretty good bird for doing that. And yeah, this was this was not good news, because this is something that still is still kind of hanging over the whole industry. We're seeing this at the moment with the SEC's case against Ripple, where it's saying that it sold XRP as an unregistered security. That case is still not resolved, well into its second year now. And yeah, we still haven't got not even an end in sight, really. Maybe the end of 2022, but who knows. So, late December 2017, Bitcoin reached just below 20K, which was an all-time high, and then it crashed big time. And ETH continued pumping into the new year, into 2018, and it hit its all-time high of just over $1,400 on the 13th of January, and then it did the same thing. And this coincided with regulators in the US and elsewhere deciding, right, this has gone far enough. We're going to crack down on crypto. As I guess you can imagine, really, given everything that had been going on, the crazy money being raised by these ICOs. And obviously, sadly, many ICOs turned out to be scams, really. So, people quickly cottoned on that this thing was so hot, this sector was so hot. All you needed to do was come up with a fancy
name idea,
pitch, maybe a website. Not always a website. Like some of them were just like, you'd think, how on earth would anyone fall for this? But people did, because that's what happens when
there's a gold rush.
Yeah, people are just scrambling over themselves to invest in, whatever comes their way. So obviously, lots of people were losing a lot of money, and that is bound to attract the attention of the regulators. And I mean, people like the SEC, their job is protecting investors, so they kind of had to step in. So ICO fraudsters started getting arrested when they could actually be found. Plenty kind of disappeared without trace and were never seen again. And in January 2018, the BitConnect Ponzi scheme, which had been huge, that imploded in January. Investors lost over $2 billion in it. It was, oh God, yeah, I remember it. I remember it pretty well, and it was a terrible time, because the BitConnect thing had promised investors these crazy returns, and there's some just bizarre footage. They had a conference, they had a big BitConnect event, and they had this guy called Carlos Matos on the stage who was just crazy. And there's footage, if you type in BitConnect into YouTube or something, you'll see this guy, and it's just him like just going mental on stage, and he eventually kind of ends it by shouting BitConnect. It's just wow. You look at it and you think anyone new to crypto at that precise moment in time, you could forgive them for just walking away and not having anything to do with it again. You're just like,
is it worse than that Microsoft dance when Bill Gates and co were is it Windows 98 or something like that, and they're unveiling it on stage and they're all dancing like absolute dads.
Yeah. Okay, so I think firstly we need a quick recap of what proof of stake is.
Yeah.
For anyone who missed that episode or just wasn't paying attention.
And potentially me, who may have forgotten.
And potentially who I saw the information go in one ear and just dribble out the other. Okay, so as we know, a proof of work blockchain has miners, and they expend energy in the form of computing power in order to win the chance to create a block and add it to the blockchain. And of course, the winning miner in that situation gets the block reward as remuneration for their efforts. And I should point out as well that proof of work miners, they also get paid transaction fees as well. That's an added incentive for doing the work that they do. But the block reward is kind of the big headline grabber. Now, we've looked at this in detail before, but suffice to say that a proof of work chain is very secure because you would need to expend an insane amount of energy to try and corrupt it, certainly in Bitcoin's case. And probably that energy would probably cost more than you'd actually gain financially from corrupting the network, assuming that the network didn't, that Bitcoin itself didn't go to zero because everyone realized it had been corrupted. But anyway, so Bitcoin's blockchain is also super decentralized because there are so many miners on the network, and because there are so many nodes as well who aren't miners but do, they do run the Bitcoin software. So they are participating on the network. Now, there are disadvantages, though, because obviously, proof of work blockchain is extremely expensive. It chews up a lot of energy, and it is now very expensive to become a Bitcoin miner because your electricity bill is insane and you need lots of expensive equipment to do it. Proof of work, because of this energy use, because of the way it's built, it's also kind of heavy and slow. It can't process many transactions per second. Bitcoin, is about 7 or 8 transactions per second, which is nothing really. Proof of stake, however, works differently. On a proof of stake chain, miners are instead known as validators, as I said earlier, and instead of expending computing power to try and get chosen to add the next block to the chain, validators, they stake the blockchain's native coin. They put their money down. And again, remember, I think the best way to think of this is through the lottery analogy. So with proof of work, the more energy you expend, the more lottery tickets you get, the more chances you have to win. Proof of stake works similarly. In its case, the more the validators stake, the higher their chances of getting chosen. It's like, that's putting more money down to buy more lottery tickets again. So proof of stake, therefore, doesn't need lots of computers running, hashing all the time. The winner of the lottery is instead chosen at random. And this means, as you can probably guess, this drastically lowers the amount of energy that a proof of stake chain consumes. I mean, it's 99.9% less. It's a negligible amount of energy, really, in the grand scheme of things, to run a proof of stake blockchain.
But people with more moolah or more
and
coin or whatever.
This is the big. This
get
is
rewarded
the big,
more frequently.
Yeah, exactly. This is the problem that proof of work lovers, Bitcoiners will raise about proof of stake, and it's a very valid point. What happens if someone it gives a lot of power to those with
whales?
Money. Yeah, to the whales. Proof of stake, it is much faster, a higher TPS score, more transactions per second. Because it's not relying on all this heavy computing power to be done. And it has, as a result, become by far the most popular blockchain consensus model. And this is especially in terms, going back to this energy usage again, this is especially as ESG, environmental, social and governance concerns, have come to shape investor behavior, especially big investors. And nowadays, if you're a big institution wanting to invest, you have to have an eye on ESG. And obviously, a lot of people say, well, because Bitcoin uses so much electricity, it's therefore bad for the planet. And that ignores the fact that a lot of that electricity comes from renewable sources. It ignores the fact that Bitcoin mining has become a lot more energy efficient. But I'm not going to fall down that rabbit hole because I think I've spoken about this before. Now, as you say, Mike, the concerns are that proof of stake is not as decentralized or as secure as proof of work, because the higher stake, higher chance model means that those who are able to stake more are basically able to get selected to validate a block and claim the reward more. So, and for instance, in order to become a validator on Ethereum, you need to stake 32 ETH. I mean, that is hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is not money that most people have. On some other proof of stake chains, the barrier to entry is even higher. The minimum stake to become a validator can be hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of the particular coin, and also in some cases you need pretty up-to-date hardware as well. You need pretty expensive hardware. So again, this raises the concerns around centralization. How can you call something decentralized if only a handful of
few of people who can afford it can do it?
Yeah. And of course, staking can be very profitable because you get a cut of you stand a chance to win these block rewards, and you also get network fees as well. Now, there are ways that the man or woman in the street can participate in a proof of stake blockchain. You can actually delegate. So you can put money into a staking pool, which means you basically lend your ETH, for instance, to someone else, and they will, in order that they can run a validator themselves. So let's say there's a group of us, none of us have the 32 ETH required to become a validator. But if we pooled all that together, then we'd have enough to run a validator node, and then we could obviously split up any money that we earn from that. A bit like a lottery syndicate. I guess. Everyone clubs together, they buy loads of tickets, and they split any winnings. And so it is possible for non-whales to stake as well, but there are still a lot of concerns around centralization with proof of stake. But as I said, that hasn't stopped it becoming really, really popular for a whole load of reasons, not least environmental concerns, but also speed as well. And it was these concerns around speed and scalability that got Vitalik interested in proof of stake. And since kind of 2017, 2018, he's been working to move Ethereum onto a proof of stake model. Now, as you can imagine, for a project that has gotten as big as Ethereum with so much going on, that is not easy. And this is why the switch over to proof of stake has been going on for years now. They've been working on this, as I say, since kind of 2017, 18. So what's that, over 4 years now. But it's a necessary one, though. Ethereum is so dominant, so many projects are building on it that it needs to be able to scale. It can't go on the way it is. And this slowness has made it unusable at times.
When the fees get too high.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I wanted to mention at this point, actually. Gas fees. Because if you'll remember, in order to transact on the Ethereum network, let's say I want to send some ETH to you, I have to pay a fee for the miners on the network to process that transaction. That's kind of a reward for their computing power, and that's part of the way that miners on a proof of work network, that's part of how they earn their crust, if you like. Now, the problem is that when there are so many people trying to transact, when there are so many transactions queuing up to
just
get
loads of kittens.
When so many people are trying to buy and sell and breed digital cats, there's this huge backlog of transactions waiting to go through. And what happens is that some people who are willing to pay more gas to the miners to have their transaction prioritized.
It's kind of surge charge.
Yeah. And what this means is that the gas price gets progressively bid up. And so in order to get your transaction processed, you at times have to pay an absolutely exorbitant fee. And gas prices on Ethereum have become insane. Not all the time. It is still possible to transact relatively cheaply on Ethereum. But at times of high demand, forget it. I just want to quickly talk about something that's come up again in response to these scaling issues that Ethereum has and the kind of slow rollout of this proof of stake that's attracted a lot of criticism. So, and as I say, at times of high demand, as we know, the network is pretty much unusable unless you're prepared to pay insane gas fees. But recently, we've seen the emergence of some projects that basically make using Ethereum easier, and these are known as Layer 2s. Layer 2 scaling solutions, to give them their full title. Obviously, Ethereum being a Layer 1. Layer 2s, and some examples here, Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum are all examples of Layer 2 projects. They're built on top of Ethereum, but they use their own chains to compute transactions off the main Ethereum chain. And they reference the main Ethereum chain for security purposes, but take the transactional strain off of it. And this obviously allows for faster and cheaper transactions than would be possible on the main chain. And these have become a very useful stopgap whilst we wait for shard chains and proof of stake in general. And these Layer 2s, like shard chains, they can periodically submit summaries of their data to the main chain to keep the whole network updated. But they've been useful to take some of the strain off the main Ethereum network. That said, it's still often slow and expensive to use. These Layer 2s have helped, but they haven't solved the problem. And again, as we've seen, these kind of rival Layer 1s have taken advantage of this situation to make some inroads into Ethereum's market share, but none of them have so far come close to mounting a serious challenge to Ethereum's dominance. And I'm going to go as far as to say that if the move to proof of stake is completed relatively soon and without any disasters happening along the way, then it's for me it's kind of hard to see how Ethereum could be toppled. It's not impossible. I mean, it could still happen. But Ethereum is so dominant, it does surprise me in a way, even though it can become so unusable, even though the Ethereum experience can be pretty miserable sometimes if you're trying to pile into some hot new NFT project or something like that. Despite all this, people are still building on it. It has so much use, and I struggle to see how another project is going to take that away, certainly in the short term. It's going to be a very long-term thing to try and chip away at Ethereum's lead. I mean, I think the future, like anyone who imagines that the future of crypto is going to be, sort of one chain to rule them all and thing like that, is wrong. I think there are going to be lots of different blockchains. There are lots of other, cryptocurrency blockchains that do different things. It's not all about Bitcoin and then a whole load of layer twos. There are lots of cryptos that do different things. But it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of layer one landscape shapes up, and whether some layer ones will kind of specialize in kind of some aspects. Maybe one or two blockchains will emerge as kind of the blockchains for NFTs or something like that. Maybe one particular blockchain or a small handful of them will be where most of decentralized finance kind of eventually finds itself. But it's so difficult to predict how this might pan out, and so the easiest thing for the moment is to say, well, it's still very much, the ball is still very much in Ethereum's court, and obviously it has this kind of network effects, this first mover advantage. It's built up so much activity that it's going to be very difficult for another project to overtake that. And these rival projects, and I'm going to use the examples of Cardano and Polkadot here, they have kind of gone about it a different way. Rather than Ethereum kind of launched, it's like, this is what we can do, and they've been trying to basically correct it as they go along ever since. These other projects are sort of starting, having learned the lessons of what has happened before on Ethereum, they're building these supposedly much more resilient networks that should theoretically be able to scale to handle Ethereum's volume. Most of these are still very much in development. Yeah. I mean, Polkadot is an interesting one. Polkadot uses something. Its main chain is called the relay chain, and then it has what are called parachains, which are these kind of separate blockchains that work in a kind of similar way to shards. And the Polkadot network is in the middle of kind of rolling these parachains out, and various projects. Each parachain is reserved for one particular project, and at the moment it's conducting what are called parachain slot auctions in order for whichever projects are building on Polkadot, they're basically bidding to get a parachain slot. And that's how that's going to work. But so the Polkadot network is growing. Cardano is doing it slightly differently. Cardano is basically a peer-reviewed project. So rather than kind of put the network out there and see what happens, they've been building it painstakingly for years now. Every stage is being peer-reviewed. It's going out to all these various developers and scientists and people like that to look over, with the hope that when it's up and fully functioning, they will have spotted every potential problem, and it'll run like Ethereum, like we'd all like Ethereum to run. But obviously this is a slow process. Smart contracts have only been enabled on Cardano for a few months. They're still kind of rolling out dApps. There are lots of projects building on it, but they're still it's still very much in development. So that is the kind of landscape at the moment. Ethereum is the daddy in that particular niche of cryptocurrency. There are lots of projects lining up to try and take its crown, to try and take it down. But Ethereum, this change to proof of stake, this change to Ethereum 2 that we're not allowed to call it, is and it's a huge factor in the whole crypto space at the moment. Really, everyone is kind of waiting on this to happen. And I want to finish up by saying Ethereum is capturing the public imagination more and more. It's not just all the stuff that's happening on it. It's not just the fact that Vitalik is such a prominent figure in crypto and beyond, I think, as well. He was on the cover of Time magazine recently.